All right. Good. Well, let me kick off with a few words while people are still getting into the webinar. Welcome everyone to this Land at Scale webinar. My name is Gemma Betsema and I'm with the Land at Scale program. And this webinar is organized together with Land Portal and with the Norwegian Refugee Council. And as you may know, we've been organizing these webinars over the past years. Our previous sequence was looking into fit for purpose land administration. And in this one and the coming two webinars, so 3 in total, we'll be diving into the topic of conflict and land. So today is our first one in that sequence. Also, during the webinar, feel free to leave your suggestions for specific topics for the next two also with us. We're curious to hear from you. And I will stop here after saying welcome to everyone. And I'm very pleased to hand over to my namesake, Gemma van der Haar, who will chair this session and introduce our great speakers as well. So over to you, Gemma.
Thank you, Gemma. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's online with us. I hope you are well, wherever you are. Before I introduce myself, I would like to let you know that we have interpretation into French and Spanish. And please click on the globe icon at the lower part of your Zoom window. This may be under the More button if you don't find it immediately, and select your language. And meanwhile, as many of you are already doing, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. My name is Gemma van der Haar. I'm a social scientist at Wageningen University and chair of Landak. I'm very honored to be able to be with you today in this capacity. I've worked on land issues myself in different contexts, many of them conflict affected. And I have come to understand displacement as posing complex challenges, both from a land rights and land governance perspective, but also from a humanitarian and peace building perspective. And I'm sure we'll hear about both of these today. My role today is to act as the moderator. So I will be introducing the session, the panel, and then asking the panelists a series of questions about their experiences. After this, there will be time to take your questions, and you can be entering these in the chat and they will be monitored, and some of them may be even answered on the go. Internal displacement is one of the most pressing and enduring global problems related to and aggravated by conflict dynamics, but also climate-related crises, fragile governance, and we should add the rise of authoritarianism. At the heart of displacement lie struggles over housing, land, and property rights. Issues that shape whether displaced families can return home, integrate into new communities, and build durable futures. So it's very topical that we discuss this issue today. And let me underline how much I appreciate that Land Portal and the Land at Scale program have, together with NRC, have programmed this series. This first webinar in the series on land and conflict brings together experiences from Iraq, Somalia, and Latin America to explore how land governance can support solutions for displaced persons, but internally displaced as well as refugees. We will look with our speakers at challenges on the ground, innovative approaches to securing tenure rights, addressing complex legal and customary systems, and strengthening the agency of displaced communities themselves. We aim with this to set the stage for comparative learning and deeper reflection across contexts. Approaches in this field are evolving and are technically, legally, and politically complex. I'm excited to hear from our esteemed panelists as they share their insights and experiences on this critical topic. I've been asked to take you through a few logistical notes. First of all, this webinar is being streamed live on multiple platforms. If you have questions, as I believe I said, please post them using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we will answer them later in the webinar. In case your question goes to a particular person, please indicate who that is. Finally, in the interest of transparency, I should add that today's session is being recorded and you will receive the link to the video afterwards. An article with the key messages will be made available later in Land Portal's website. For the speakers and myself, a reminder to speak slowly. Allow me now to introduce our speakers. We have an excellent panel around the table, and I'm honored to introduce them to you. First of all, we are pleased to welcome Jim Robinson, coordinator of the Global Housing, Land and Property Area of Responsibility on behalf of the Norwegian Refugee Council. He has extensive experience as a researcher, mediator, and educator across humanitarian, development, and peace-building contexts. Jim brings deep expertise on land, conflict, and displacement, and a commitment to advancing practical solutions through dialogue and capacity building. He will be our first speaker, but I will first introduce the rest of the panel. We are joined by Javier Prieto, Program Management Officer with UN Habitat in Iraq. He leads efforts under the Modernizing Urban Land Knowledge Initiative to strengthen housing, land, and property rights, advance e-land governance, and support tenure security for all Iraqis, including internally displaced persons and returnees in conflict-affected areas. Federica Aguaviva is a land governance expert currently working for UN Habitat in Somalia. And she has experience working for durable solutions and governance projects centered around improving land administration systems and tenure security for displacement affected communities in urban settings to foster integration and inclusive urban growth. She is accompanied today by a colleague who will be participating in the chat, but I still would like to introduce her, Balkesa Abdi Sheikh, Program Manager with UN Habitat Somalia, who has over 8 years of experience with various UN Habitat projects, including a current Durable Solutions initiative that integrates land and urban governance, tenure security, and sustainable urban development in Somalia. She is deeply committed to linking policy, planning, and practice to foster inclusive land management and resilient urban growth. Finally, on our list is Efraín Cruz Gutierrez, Global Advisor on Information, Counseling, and Legal Assistance for the Norwegian Refugee Council in Latin America. He has extensive experience working on housing, land, and property rights of displaced populations, refugees, and individuals in need of international protection across Latin America. He has worked with the World Bank-funded Land Protection Project for displaced populations in Colombia, which later evolved into the Land Restitution Unit, where he coordinated 2 legal teams. So I assume you will agree with me that this panel looks extremely promising if we see the expertise that is brought around the table. Let me now give the floor to Jim, who will provide a brief presentation on conflict, displacement, housing, land, and property rights around the world. Jim, over to you. You have about 10 minutes.
Thanks so much, Gemma, and really glad to be here with you today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. As our moderator mentioned, this is the first in the Land at Scale series on land and conflict. So I wanted to just take the opportunity to introduce some of the wider themes and areas that will feature in the fascinating case studies we'll hear about today and in the coming sessions. So in the introduction, you heard HLP mentioned, or housing, land and property. Now, so why does this matter for this conversation? Well, HLP, or housing, land and property, is a term that's used sort of in humanitarian response. It's drawn from all sorts of international and national legal and policy instruments. It's at the heart of effective, safe and inclusive humanitarian action, and responding to HLP issues is key in all displacement phases. HLP rights characterise every stage of displacement, sort of acting both as catalysts for and consequences of conflict and displacement. So first, I just wanted to think a little bit about what does it mean to be displaced in terms of like conflict or crisis. Displaced people are forced to leave their homes and their land without knowing where they're going to be living, whether they'll be able to go back and recover their property and possessions. So this can expose people to poverty and many protection risks, including hunger, forms of violence and barriers to accessing of humanitarian assistance. In the short term, people may stay with households in host communities, in empty buildings, or they will build shelters and grow food on land without permission. And this might be okay for a while, but it can also cause disputes with landowners or host communities and authorities, and can put people at risk of forced eviction or like further displacement and more harm. So without the necessary permissions, shelters, water and sanitation infrastructure or land for agriculture might be destroyed, or demands might be made for payment of rent or similar. People who have to stay in informal settlements or camps or collective centres are likely to experience inadequate housing conditions. There might be overcrowding, limited access to water and sanitation services. And this can have a significant impact on health and well-being and expose women and girls in particular to sexual and gender-based violence. And it can be tempting to think of an emergency response as short-term, so there's no need to consider the implications on land too much. And of course, this may be true. If there is a disaster, people may move away and then they might return within a few months. But often this is not the case, especially if the displacement is linked to conflict in some way. The average length of displacement is around 10 years for people who leave their homes but stay in their country. And if you cross the border and become a refugee, then that can double to 20 years, being away from your home. And as displacement becomes protracted, the risk of eviction can increase due to an inability to pay rent, or the people who own or have access to the land want to reclaim that land, or if the occupation was unauthorised. Internally displaced people could find their original homes and land are irrevocably lost. For example, there might have been development projects that took place whilst they were away, for example, the building of a dam or some other development. And if people are able to return to their place of origin, they may find someone else is occupying their home or using their land. They might not be able to access justice mechanisms to resolve these issues, or they may no longer have access to their housing, land and property documentation. It could have been lost, stolen or destroyed, or maybe it wasn't issued in the first place. So they'll find it very difficult to verify their claims. Conflicts may often lead to new configurations of power, and that might be reflected in control and ownership over land and property. So these can all combine to cause significant obstacles for the return and restitution of HLP rights. For example, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where returning displaced persons often faced organised violence. In many situations of displacement, women face further challenges securing a new place to live or in reclaiming their housing, land and property, especially in contexts where discriminatory practices try to exclude them from inheritance or from controlling housing and land in some way. Addressing these issues is essential to achieving durable solutions. Resolving long-standing grievances and disputes over ownership, control and use of land and land-based resources is essential for fostering social reconciliation and establishing a lasting peace if there's been a conflict. And it's important to note here that there is more at stake during episodes of involuntary property loss than mere loss of an economic asset. We have deep ties and roots to the land on which we've lived and on which we're from. And we see that all around, where there's much more at stake than just losing access to land and property. It's about a way of life. It's about who we are. I just want to finish with an example. When I visited Ethiopia and we went up to the north to Tigray and we saw a number of different examples of these things coming together. We saw people living in a site that had been set up. The location, though, was away from where people wanted to work. There was a problem with planning that site. It didn't take into account all sorts of things that needed to be there. People had difficulty accessing education for their children. In fact, this caused disputes with the local community as they felt there was a clash of needs and not enough provision. We saw other people staying with host communities, so much more involved and embedded in the community. And this was fine to begin with, but as time went on, it was more and more difficult for people to have the space they needed, and there weren't functioning systems to resolve disputes as they arose. And we then spoke to people who were trying to return. They'd heard it was safe, but they found that their place was occupied. Or maybe they faced violent reactions when they did return. So again, they had to be displaced locally to the place where they left. And this for us for a number of reasons. For example, maybe their documentation was damaged, destroyed, if they had it. Their land or their home was occupied. There were armed groups using that land or maybe giving that away as a kind of part of their sort of spoils of war, as it were. And if they tried to claim it, they were threatened to be killed or met with violence. And that might be even if they'd lived in the same space for generations. There wasn't a functioning land administration to be able to resolve these disputes or issue certificates as they were needed. And there was a need to try and use the sort of communal customary processes around the community to resolve these issues. But even to access those, there was a need for resources for travel, for accommodation, and to have people who could manage those processes who weren't there. And we saw schools that had been transformed because they had many, many people staying there in some of the worst conditions that you could imagine. So how do we respond? Well, we'll hear some examples today from Somalia, Iraq, and Latin America, where people are working to resolve these issues. But one thing to note, it's increasingly acknowledged that addressing housing, land and property issues that are so essential for a dignified and effective response, that has to be done across the humanitarian responses and through to durable solutions and development. All of these things need to come together for an essential and effective and sustainable outcome for crisis-affected people. HLP issues need to be integrated across all parts of a response and in all areas that come into contact in some way with people's access to housing, land and property. We need to have a solutions focus from the start, but this can't be just put on those in operations. It has to come from and through programme design from agencies and HQs and from donors. Donors can demand that we consider HLP issues with a longer term focus. Humanitarians can't do all of this. Of course, governments will be able to take the lead in many of these areas. HLP is a local issue and it has to be done and engaged with in partnership with local organisations and community-based organisations as well. So the challenge as a sector and beyond is we need a simultaneous approach that looks at the emergency humanitarian needs but with a solutions lens, which is why this workshop series is an important opportunity to bring together practitioners, analysts, policymakers and dreamers to see and make the connections between their own work and the essential web of what is needed for safe, secure and dignified living.
Thank you, Jim, for this excellent presentation. I think you brought us right into the key issues that we are going to be looking at today and in the next issues of the series. Let me highlight a few. First of all, bringing out that displacement dynamics are often about multiple waves of displacement back and forth, often very lengthy, which obviously complicates the question how to support people in accessing land and developing a right over land in new places or reclaiming them in their places of origin. You have also brought out that there's often a combination of new issues because of the displacement, but also lingering older land issues that had remained unresolved. This is also an important point. Thank you also for placing land issues right in what we call the triple nexus. So the humanitarian, the development, and the longer term outlook, and the peace building aspect, which is about addressing root causes, but also about reconciliation, helping people to build joint futures, which is quite a challenge. You also mentioned, and that's the last point I would like to make, you also made us aware of so this is, even though this is approached as an issue of rights of displaced peoples and or returnees, it is also about the impact on and relation with host communities. They are an important, they're an essential part of any solution in a way, because new grievances may be created if solutions favoring displaced people are imposed imposed on local populations and leads to their dispossession. So thanks, you did all that in your 10 minutes. Excellent. Thank you so much. We will now open the panel and we start with Iraq. Audience, like we said, we have 3 rounds of questions, so you will get to hear everybody 3 times in the same order, starting with Iraq. And for the first question, the first round, we are basically reflecting on the challenges in the different contexts where these projects work. And Javier, we start with you. You take us to Iraq, where your work is with Yazidi returnees. Now, could you describe for us the specific challenges they face in reclaiming their homes and land, and how the legacy of conflict has shaped today's difficulties or disputes? The floor is yours. You have about 3 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Gemma, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm glad and grateful to participate in this webinar. Regarding to your question, in Iraq, we are facing different challenges. Some of them are general and described by my colleague Jim, but specifically with the Yazidi minorities, we have to go back to the 1970s historical dispossession or the Arabization policies that the Ba'ath regime had in the 1970s prevent the Yazidis from registering their land. They were forced to be reallocated into different complexes, but they were prevented from registering their land, not only with Yazidis, but other minorities, because the policy was to become or Arabize the country, so they were prevented from registering the land. Farther down in the time, we also face the impact of ISIL, the terrorist Islamic State group, who aggravated the situation and forced the displacement of this, especially the Yazidi community, also the Catholics and Christians. But they destroyed and displaced more than hundreds of thousands Yazidis, and thousands, more than about 6,000 to 10,000 homes were destroyed. They were already prevented from registering their land. They were occupying these territories, but they also were again destroyed and displaced. So most of them, we also faced there that they didn't have document. They didn't have any proof of evidences of their tenure or occupancy of that land. And when we tried and we started to working with them, we faced also illegal occupation, with all these historical dispossession and conflicts, that they were facing. So they faced that illegal occupation, the destruction, as Jim was mentioning, and then the state had very complex procedures to claim property or to be compensated. So that was also another challenge that we were facing. And in the middle of all this, the gender discrimination, because the woman or the family who lost their household, it was a man, or they lost that, they were discriminated at the woman, and they were also afraid, particularly to claim land or rights or anything. So in general and specifically, we were facing in Iraq this challenge. And with the lack of the protection from the state on all this community.
Thank you, Javier. We lost you, but I think it was just for a few seconds. Thanks a lot. You brought out a number of key issues. The historical dispossession, you underlined that, very important. the issue of the missing evidence or the lost documents. I am confident that in the next round you will tell us a little bit about how you dealt with that in ensuring rights. I'm curious to learn more about that. And and thanks also for bringing up the gender issue that others might also pick up on. Thank you, Javier. So next we go to Federica, who will take us to Somalia, where we've seen high numbers of internally displaced due to the combination of conflict and climate shocks, droughts. We'd like to learn from you how you see these dynamics affecting the land access of the internally displaced peoples, but also the possible integration of displaced people in the urban environment to which they move. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gemma, and good morning, afternoon, or evening to everybody. Indeed, the displacement situation in Somalia is complex. It is estimated that around 25% of the entire population is living in displacement, mostly coming from rural to urban areas. So in rural areas, for a society like Somalia that is based on pastoralism, land is accessed based on traditional tenure systems governed by customary law. It's called the Her in Somali language, which is based on communal tenure right to access and use the land. Access is shaped by clan dynamics, where each clan has its own set of rules. So there is not one customary law. It's more diversified. And the clan identity has strong connection with their land and the natural resources in the area of origin. But nowadays, as you were mentioning, climate pressure and increasingly frequent environmental shocks such as drought and floods trigger land degradation and conflict over natural resources. And this goes in pair with conflict, armed conflict, and non-state armed actor controlling large part of the territory. Overall, this leads to population movement, and in the city in which the landed scale funded project that we're implemented is called Samienta operates, displacement is characterized as being protracted. So there are kids that were born in these IDP settlements in urban areas, differently from the parents that come from rural setting. So the first town is Baidoa, which is a city that faced massive, fast urbanization starting from mid-2010, triggered by conflict and protracted environmental causes. So a city that was planned to be for 7,000 people is now hosting more than 500,000 without a master plan since the beginning on how to manage this fast urbanization. And therefore, the agricultural land in peri-urban areas across the city has been converted into informal settlement, further aggravating land degradation and environmental pressure. The other city is Bosaso, which is located in the north of Somalia in a region that is very arid. This town has faced slow but constant population movement starting from the Somali Civil War in 1991, because it was seen as a safe haven and in terms of security. In here, IDPs are coming from all parts of Somalia, and nowadays newcomers keep coming through connections and social network, still from places that are very far, like Halafe, that is more than 1,300 kilometers far away. In terms of land access, these people in urban areas settle in informal settlements, mostly located on private land. So to access this land, they have to rent the land, and then they have to pay also for the right to build a shelter in these informal settlements. Well, the second part of your question relates to integration, which is a very complex and multi-faced issues. And it's impacted by several factors that cross across spatial segregation of the settlement, that are lack connectivity, are far, lack access to services from the main systems in the town, social segregation, dictated by marginalization, clan dynamics, and lack of social safety nets, and poverty itself, which act as a glass ceiling for finding better livelihood opportunities, hinders access to education, and also investments in housing solutions. So people are forced to live in bushes, so in tents. In this context, lack of tenure security negatively affects all of these factors, leading to the families having to spend all their money in rent and having limited opportunities to improve their living condition and further develop their households and their resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Federica. I think what really speaks from your work, your contribution here, is that when we talk about displacement, we also often talk about urbanization, because many people go to cities to find a safer place or hope to find livelihood opportunities there. And cities are already places where there's a lot of pressure on space, where dynamics tend to be pretty intense. And this is the context within which they need to find a space for themselves, bringing out these issues of belonging as well that you mentioned. Next, so thank you very much. Next we go to Efrain, who will take us to Latin America. We see displacement in Latin America also stemming from a range of dynamics, including also criminal violence. We've heard about non-armed actors in the other context, but here we also have criminal violence, climate shocks, mixed migration, where economic and conflict factors may intertwine. How do these drivers complicate the recognition and protection of displaced people's rights? The floor is yours.
Hola, Gemma. Muchísimas gracias a todas las personas que están aquí presentes. Muy contento de poder participar en este espacio, especialmente de poder hablar en español acerca de Latinoamérica, que normalmente esto no se puede llevar a cabo. Con respecto a tu pregunta, bueno, lo primero es mencionar que el contexto latinoamericano es muy variado. Entonces, existen países que históricamente han sufrido el desplazamiento y que han tratado de abordarlo de alguna manera. Creo que el caso más emblemático puede ser el de Colombia, pero también hay otros países que no han logrado avanzar a pesar de que el desplazamiento forzado es un fenómeno persistente e histórico. Hablemos del caso de Guatemala, de Honduras o de México, solo por mencionar algunos. A pesar de ello, el desplazamiento forzado normalmente se ha asociado únicamente a temas de conflicto interno y en el mejor de los casos a escenarios de violencia, pero lo cierto es que el desplazamiento forzado obedece cada vez más a diversas causas, como tú lo mencionabas, que se entrecruzan y se encuentran entrelazadas actualmente. Las situaciones adversas en la región se han ido recrudeciendo con los años y esto hace que los conflictos y la violencia y el deterioro ambiental y los flujos migratorios mixtos se traslapen y afecten las mismas zonas y también afecten a las mismas poblaciones. O para decirlo mejor, estas poblaciones son poblaciones multiafectadas. E incluso en estos nuevos escenarios, pues hay unos actores que no necesariamente son considerados como actores tradicionales, que entran a jugar dentro de los escenarios de desplazamiento como unos actores activos. Y este puede ser el caso del sector privado, que en algunas ocasiones se aprovecha de los contextos violentos y de la aquiescencia de las autoridades para, pues en este caso, usurpar las tierras o las viviendas de las poblaciones que son afectadas. Esto complejiza la situación, evidentemente, porque de alguna manera estas actuaciones están cobijadas por cierto marco de legalidad y pues se vuelve un factor adicional para tener en cuenta. Pero paralelamente, los marcos regulatorios, cuando existen, funcionan en silos. Entonces, tenemos unos marcos para los desplazados por la violencia, pero también hay otros marcos que pueden abordar las situaciones de las crisis climáticas y luego tenemos otros marcos para los flujos migratorios mixtos, etcétera. Y esto, a su vez, hace que haya autoridades que estén trabajando independiente cada uno de estos temas. Y ahí hay un reto enorme en materia de coordinación. Y otro factor es que nosotros como latinoamericanos somos como muy apegados a la ley escrita y nos gusta que las leyes digan específicamente qué es lo que hay que hacer y en ese sentido a nuestras administraciones les cuesta trabajo armar programas si no están precisamente enmarcados en una norma que diga específicamente qué es lo que hay que hacer. Y esto hace que los contextos evolucionen muy rápido, pero los procesos legislativos y los procesos de construcción de política pública son muy lentos. Y ahí hay una discrepancia. Entonces, mientras los contextos evolucionan rápido, nuestras normas y nuestras formas de poder abordar desde la institucionalidad este tipo de problemáticas, pues va a un paso que no es el adecuado. Y ante este escenario de factores entrelazados, eh, hablaban antes en este evento del enfoque, ¿no? Del triple nexo entre lo humanitario, el desarrollo y la construcción de paz. Y es justamente la falta del abordaje de este triple nexo el que impide que nosotros como latinoamericanos podamos abordar el fenómeno de una manera mucho más comprensiva, en donde incluyamos las causas del desplazamiento y los efectos, y de otro lado, pues también nos estamos encontrando en una situación de financiación muy complicada, que no solamente pues es un tema de escasez de recursos, sino que también hay un desinterés generalizado en abordar los temas de desplazamiento y de migración desde un enfoque de derechos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Javier. Unfortunately, I heard you in English, not in Spanish, because of how we all have to set up our interpreter. Thanks to the interpreter, though. Great. Thanks for bringing in a few additional points. And I want to highlight two of the things that you said. The role of the private sector, which hints at the fact that displacement for some actors is part of a business model. And they profit from it. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. I also really appreciated how you problematize the role of the law in two ways. The over-reliance, perhaps, on the law in order to come to solutions, which does not make for flexible, agile responding to the problems at hand, but also for pointing out that for that reason the law often lags behind dynamics that are very quick, and I'm sure the other speakers also recognize that. So thank you. We go back to our first speaker in the second round. Javier, so in this second round, we will be looking at, for all of you, how your interventions have sought to address the challenges that you found on the ground. What would you like to highlight about your work in Iraq?
Thank you, Gemma. Well, I would like to highlight we have focused, first of all, in earning trust and confidence through advocacy, make the returnees and the minorities aware of their rights, how to apply. We also provide legal support to make the claims for the ownership and the compensations that they were very
we have difficulty hearing you.
And so finally, can you hear me now better, or is it any?
Yes.
It might be my. Okay.
You were frozen for a bit, so maybe you want to briefly recap what you just said.
Oh, okay. So let me recap. We first focused on the advocacy, awareness, and capacity building to make everybody aware of their rights. We also provide support to the returnees on the claims for the also the compensations after the destruction.
Javier, sorry to interrupt, but we are the troubles. The trouble with connectivity continues. There's a suggestion that you
let
switch off
me
your camera. Maybe we will hear you better.
okay. I did. Is that any better? Is that improving the bandwidth? Maybe my voice is clearly now.
For now, yes.
1, 2,
yes.
testing.
Yes.
Sorry about
Please.
this. Okay. Okay. So let me recap very fast. I was saying that with the Land and Scale program, we were focusing on advocacy, awareness, and capacity building. This is a main pillar on earn the trust and the let's say with the returnees, but also with the government and the state, the legal, let's say we're providing legal assistance for the compensations and also for the claiming of the property. We also decided to use open source technology, the STDM, social domain DM, the land administration domain model, is an open source, very easy to use, and to register their land, even they are informal or with a very little document available, and it's very precise. We also issue an occupancy certificate for the returnees. UN Habitat endorsed this certificate, and we validate it with local is the and then the district authorities, and also at the federal level, they endorse this occupancy certificate, proven evidence to claim a title deed. So we put in place sort of pillars in order to support all the challenges and support the HLP claims for the returnees.
Thank you very much, Javier.
Thank you.
And sorry that we had these connectivity difficulties. I was personally very interested by what you said about how you work around the fact of missing documents. And maybe there will be time later to dive deeper into that. Federica, also for you, how did you, with what approaches and methods did you approach the challenges that you saw, for example, around eviction that you highlighted as one of the problems? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Gemma. Yes, as you noted, like evictions for displacement affected population in urban areas in Somalia is a reality, an everyday reality. And as said before, the most common reason is not being able to pay rent. That, by the way, is a reason for eviction also for host communities, not just for displacement affected, displaced households in cities. And indeed, the fact that the land is privately owned enable this phenomenon like gatekeeping and landowner being unwilling to invest on the land, as they see that this settlement is temporary. They're waiting for the value of the land to increase, and due to urbanization, then they're willing to resell it. So they see this camp model, as you were saying before, as temporarily instead of leaving their land empty, let's say. As a matter of fact, these, as said before as well, let me add this as well, the people coming from rural area are used to access land with this collective approach, right? This collective tenure system, whereas urban areas, access to land is based on individual ownership. So there is a disconnection in between the knowledge and the awareness of what it entails for people that start coming and arrive or are stuck in displacement in urban setting. Therefore, our program, which is a durable solution programs that focuses both on land tenure protection and land governance improvements, but also on providing services and infrastructures for these communities and livelihood opportunities as well, on this program, on its land component, focuses mostly on setting up an institutional framework to formalize and regularize land tenure. Because again, these traditional land tenure systems are challenged in urban areas due to privatization and land grabbing. So we are trying to foster legal certainty and sustainable management of land through, for example, supporting the government, the state government passing urban land management law. It's worthy to note that in Somalia there is no federal land law or federal land policy, and this contributes to a fragmented legal framework that we are trying to address with the collaboration of all the institutional stakeholders. And then at a bit more localized governance level, we work trying to foster urban regulatory frameworks, standard operating procedures and bylaws on, for example, land registration and HLP protection. At the same time, another set of intervention relates to public land allocated through IDP, through titling. These set of interventions help the government securing some land, and then through the support and the capacity building to the land departments at the municipality, we enable the issuance of title deeds and full ownership of this land for the communities that are relocated in there. We have successful stories in improvements of housing solution and safety and securities. People are very proud of the trees they planted that roots them back a bit to maybe their rural livelihoods, and then they kicked out the police because they felt very safe differently, especially women, differently from IDP settlements in which sexual harassment and rape are a constant fear for most of the women, and a big problem. We also, under our program, deployed a tool that my co-panelist Javier was talking about, STDM, the social tenure domain model. We targeted specifically displaced community in corridors in between, like either relocation or peri-urban areas and the main town that may be interested by redevelopment and investment. Therefore, we could foresee a fear of eviction for these populations. And yeah, we collected through the STDM open source model the claims of non-formal rights to land through a participatory approach that was also voted towards trying to solve small conflicts, maybe just over boundaries by showing the overall size of their land when compared. So do a bit of community awareness and conflict resolution at a very localized household level at the same time. And in future, we want to continue this set of intervention because also STDM is not acting in a vacuum, is part of a process that look at clearly defining what occupancy rights are and what these occupancy certificates or registration entails. And we will also be looking at some frameworks for maybe land donation or sharing or land readjustments, exploring innovative legal frameworks that are more rooted in existing customary and also statutory tenure security systems. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very interesting to hear how the STDM has been picked up by several of you in developing ways to record and recognize and award rights. Very interesting. Efrain, we go back to you, back to Colombia. Colombia stands out for a relatively advanced restitution framework. Other countries have in the region have less of that. What promising legal or policy tools are emerging in Colombia and across the region to address the types of challenges that we've been discussing? Over to you.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, quisiera comenzar mencionando que los temas asociados a la vivienda, la tierra y la propiedad desde un enfoque humanitario en la región representan un reto enorme. De acuerdo con las últimas cifras del ACNUR, en Latinoamérica existen alrededor de 20 millones de personas desplazadas, entre los que encontramos refugiados, solicitantes de asilo, desplazados internos, retornados y otras categorías que requieren protección internacional. Y solamente por cuestiones estadísticas el impacto en los temas relacionados con la vivienda, la tierra y la propiedad pues es considerable. Lastimosamente, estos temas no hacen parte de las prioridades en la agenda humanitaria en América Latina y solo por poner un ejemplo, pues somos la única región que no tiene un área de responsabilidad sobre vivienda, tierra y propiedad y donde tampoco tenemos unos grupos de trabajo establecidos o muy fuertes sobre el tema a nivel de país dentro de la arquitectura humanitaria actual. Asimismo, pues hay, digamos, unas prioridades por parte de los donantes que son distintas y donde los temas asociados a la vivienda y la tierra y la propiedad han disminuido en los últimos años, al menos para abordar estos temas desde un enfoque humanitario. La experiencia de Colombia sin duda es muy interesante, pero a lo mejor dejó el estándar muy alto y esto generó que una eventual respuesta en materia de vivienda, tierra y propiedad, entendida como la puesta en marcha de todo un sistema muy sofisticado, donde se tienen que disponer de unos recursos muy importantes, estuviera lejos de las capacidades y las necesidades de los contextos actuales en la región. Para no ir muy hacia atrás, pero digamos, primero fue la crisis de Venezuela que generó o ha generado más de 6,6 millones de venezolanos desplazados en la región, con millones en situaciones humanitarias muy delicadas. Luego los flujos por el Darién y las travesías hacia el norte y actualmente el tema de las deportaciones, los desplazamientos norte-sur y las personas varadas ante la imposibilidad de ingresar a Estados Unidos hacen que este escenario sea abordado más desde un enfoque de emergencia, en el sentido de tener que entregar kits, entregar cash, entregar servicios de salud, digamos, inmediatos, y donde hemos perdido como sector humanitario la oportunidad de abordar los temas a la vivienda, la tierra y la propiedad, que son cruciales para salvar las vidas de estas personas. No obstante, desde el 2020 más o menos hubo algunos hechos esperanzadores en materia de cómo se pueden crear ciertas herramientas para abordar los temas. Por ejemplo, se promulgó la ley de desplazamiento en El Salvador y más o menos por la misma época también se promulgó la ley de desplazamiento forzado en Honduras. Y si bien ambas leyes contemplan algunas medidas para atender el desplazamiento forzado, incluyendo unos mecanismos muy específicos de protección a la vivienda, a la tierra y la propiedad, eh, pues además de contemplar que los escenarios de violencia eran los únicos que causaban el desplazamiento, se dejaron por fuera factores ambientales. Y hay que tener en cuenta que justamente en Centroamérica, hablando desde el sur de México hasta Nicaragua, se encuentra el corredor seco, que anualmente tiene unos efectos muy agresivos sobre la población, en donde ambientalmente pues ahí hay unos factores que están generando desplazamiento forzado en la población y donde también estamos hablando de zonas de huracanes, solamente por mencionar algunos de los otros efectos que generan desplazamiento forzado, sin dejar de lado también pues el tema que hablábamos en la respuesta anterior acerca de el sector privado, de cómo en algunos casos se aprovecha de esas situaciones de violencia para poder hacer desalojos forzosos de la población y demás. De todas formas, a estas leyes les falta su reglamentación, por lo tanto no se han podido implementar. Entonces tenemos unas leyes que están ahí, ¿cierto? Pero que no se pueden llevar a cabo. Eh, pero en el caso de Honduras esperamos que pues esta reglamentación se pueda llevar a cabo, por lo menos está en sus etapas finales. Y en Ecuador, por su parte, ha declarado la existencia de un conflicto armado interno desde el 2024, muy centrado en situaciones de violencia. Aún no hay legislación, pero hay, digamos, una especie de iniciativas por parte de las organizaciones y de la población para poder abordar los temas de desplazamiento, incluyendo vivienda, tierra y propiedad. En conclusión, pues hay, digamos, unos retos enormes, hay algunos avances, pero todavía hay mucho trabajo por hacer en términos de refinar las legislaciones que hay y de generar nuevas legislaciones que aborden el fenómeno de una manera más comprensiva.
Thanks a lot, Efraín, for telling us what's happening in the region and the need again for not just humanitarian response, but legislative changes and the implementation of these. For the final round, I will have to ask everybody to be a little bit concise, but we have an important question for all of you in the final round, and that is, we have been talking about what you do, but displaced peoples themselves, they also do many things, make decisions about where they go, where they stay, make decisions about navigating the situation, trying to put their claims forward, trying to create new forms of belonging in the places where they are. So we want from each of you to know how you support that agency, but also how it affects your work, the kind of claim making that people do, or the use or responses to your programs that they show. How does that reflect back on you? It's a big question. Yet I'm going to have to ask any one of you to be a little bit brief in answering, highlighting the main issues, to ensure that we will have enough time for the Q&A. Javier, we return to you. I hope we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, how is it now? I plugged my mic, so maybe it's a bit better. Can you hear me?
We can, yeah. Fingers crossed
Okay.
that we will continue to hear you. Go ahead.
All right. Well, regarding to your questions, we notice and we have seen how returnees, after a good awareness campaign and information and support, and especially to women, for example, how they have decided to take the step, and to go forward with the claims, how they feel secure when we introduce the community into the process, to validate the documents, to give them support, legal or any kind of assistance, and even to like I said, to build a community around the validations, how the informal documentation is valid. Even some families will bring in pictures of what the property were before the destruction. So they give value to all this, and we see how valuable for them is any piece of evidence, to prove their ownership. And then little by little, breaking the bureaucracy with and having the occupancy certificate, being as a valid document. People feel secure, and some families will telling us this is an evidence that someday my family, will heritage or will have, a way to prove that this is their land or their property. So we have seen this impact through our work, and it's very very good to see these results, and also to provide the economic support and the legal support to them, and how they also, that makes them confident and decide to move forward into their claim. So, I don't know if that responds to your question, but this is what I came.
Yes, thank you. What I hear is that they recognize what you're doing as support in their claim making, and yeah, very interesting. Federica, we will go straight on with you. How would you respond to the question about supporting agency and how that affects your building of your search for durable solutions?
Thanks for your question, Gemma. It's very relevant, very interesting. We could talk hours about it, but let me be short. So there are many factors that influence decision-making in protracted displacement on whether to stay or move again and again. Let's remember that Somalia has this pastoralist tradition of like a movement of people, which makes the situation more fluid. There are considerations over safety, whether the land in the place of origin is controlled still by non-state actors, considerations over loss of rural livelihoods because of environmental shocks and lack of investment in agricultural livestock sector in rural areas. And there are issues related to the availability of aid in urban setting, and also to the social networks that displacement affect the community build. So from a survey, national-led survey, it's called the Durable Solution Progress Survey, the data shows that 2/3 of IDPs in 7 selected cities in between two are hosting a large stock of IDPs. 2/3 of the households would prefer to remain where they are and locally integrate. However, this same research shows that IDPs in protracted displacement do not automatically feel more integrated than newcomers. And this is in the words of the Director General of the National Center of Rural Development and Rural Solution. It happens also because households who live in protracted displacement in informal camps indefinitely have a sort of IDP tag or stigma attached to their condition. And this traps them in the mentality of being an IDP, affecting how they integrate and how they feel in the community. Breaking free of this trap starts with self-sufficiency, and this requires finding tenure security and better solution for people to land, to access, use, occupy, and reside on the land free from eviction, and sustainable employment to pay rent and access basic services. And therefore, yes, to improve the living conditions, there are interventions that relates to social cohesion, community engagement, grassroots participation, strengthening the agency of displacement population to make a plan for the future, which may be hindered by the immediate humanitarian needs, and then finding context-specific tailored strategies that combine all the before mentioned interventions. Thank you.
Thank you. Interesting to think about stigma and how that is perpetuated in a way. Efrain, I think we go to you from Latin America. I'm sure there's interesting stories to tell about people's claim making. Please go ahead again briefly.
Claro que sí. Muchísimas gracias. Bueno, a pesar de lo que yo he venido diciendo sobre los retos que tenemos desde el sector humanitario para abordar los temas de vivienda, tierra y propiedad, de todas formas sí hay muchas experiencias que son muy interesantes en América Latina, especialmente el sector de los derechos humanos, incluyendo a los actores que trabajan el tema ambiental y de desarrollo rural, con quien desafortunadamente el sector humanitario no se articula bien. Realizan un trabajo que es muy valioso en impulsar temas asociados a la gobernanza de la tierra, el empleo rural juvenil, la seguridad alimentaria y la defensa del territorio. De hecho, en junio de 2020 se llevó a cabo en Colombia el Foro Global de la Tierra y resultado de esto se promulgó la Declaración de Bogotá. Pero más allá de eso, es importante aquí resaltar que cada vez más la sociedad civil y en este caso las personas afectadas en Latinoamérica tienen más capacidades para organizarse y tienen más capacidades para poder participar de este tipo de espacios en donde pueden posicionar los temas en las agendas públicas, en donde pueden hacer un impulso de las necesidades que tienen ellos y generar conversaciones muy interesantes alrededor de los desafíos que hay en este caso, pues desde el sector rural en el acceso a la tierra. Si bien hay este tipo de expresiones en donde pues hay unos foros que son impulsados y apoyados por donantes y donde hay un respaldo, digamos, financiero y donde hay proyectos también que están respaldados. Históricamente también existen comunidades en Latinoamérica que históricamente han resistido y donde en Norte, Centroamérica y México, por ejemplo, se enfrentan a los escenarios de violencia y pues se valen de sus propias capacidades para impedir que se les arrebaten las tierras o pueblos indígenas o comunidades afro que fortalecen su capacidad organizativa para proteger su territorio y su derecho propio, no solamente en Centroamérica, sino en Sudamérica. Y estas expresiones creo que son muy valiosas. O sea, finalmente no se trata únicamente de tener un respaldo legal y un respaldo institucional, sino que son las mismas personas y son las mismas comunidades las que se pueden fortalecer y pueden impulsar este tipo digamos, de reivindicaciones. Y finalmente, solamente mencionar que en Guayaquil, una comunidad desplazada también muy desde el ámbito rural, se llama la comunidad de sociovivienda, impulsó una acción de litigio estratégico en donde le ordenó un juez constitucional al gobierno ecuatoriano instaurar una mesa de trabajo interinstitucional para abordar los temas de desplazamiento interno y en donde están incluyendo los temas asociados a vivienda, tierra y propiedad. Y aquí es importante mencionar que no son solamente procesos de resistencia desde lo político, sino también desde lo técnico y desde lo jurídico, y creo que eso es súper importante mencionarlo. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, all three of you. It's time to go to the questions. They have been the questions that people have put are shared to me in a document. There are quite a few. The first one is, I think, something that deserves attention. It's a question on rural on IDPs and how they gain access to agricultural land for their livelihoods. Is that a question that any of the three panelists could answer to? And how, in this case, you manage potential boundary issues, and I might add conflict issues with host communities already in that area. Is there, I can't see anyone now because I'm looking at the questions. What if one of the panelists would like to respond to this one? Just take the floor to briefly answer. Was I clear enough? Who would like to answer this question?
I think Ephraim is, yeah.
Yeah, Ephraim, will you take it on rural land, please?
Y quisiera centrarme sobre, si entendí bien la pregunta, sobre los temas de conflictividades entre las comunidades que llegan y las comunidades de acogida o las comunidades que retornan. Nosotros, en una experiencia que tuvimos en Colombia desde el Consejo Noruego para Refugiados, apoyando procesos de restitución de tierras, entendimos que no bastaba únicamente con asegurar la restitución legal, ¿cierto? Asegurar que esas personas tuvieran la titularidad de sus tierras y que las comunidades pudieran regresar, sino que la prevención de los conflictos iba a ser un factor fundamental para que luego no tuvieran que desplazarse nuevamente o para que pudieran pavimentar de alguna manera su camino hacia una solución duradera. En ese sentido, nosotros trabajamos con las comunidades implementando procesos de resolución colaborativa de conflicto, que no es otra cosa sino mecanismos informales de acceso a la justicia, en donde ellos mismos y ellas mismas estaban capacitadas para poder identificar sus problemas y poder solucionarlos sin necesidad de acudir a entidades o autoridades que estaban lejos o que les iban a cobrar algún dinero, y finalmente pues pudieron hacerlo. Y en ese sentido promovimos la creación de comités de convivencia que se encargaban justamente de construir una legitimidad sobre el proceso, y también podían ser un referente para las comunidades y para sus integrantes para poder acercarse a ellos y decir, bueno, tengo este problema, quisiera solucionarlo, y eventualmente lo pudieron hacer. Creo que estos son prácticas que son valiosas de mencionar, y que también, pues no solamente ha sido el caso de Colombia, sino que el Consejo Noruego lo ha hecho también en otros contextos.
Thanks a lot for sharing this. I'm sure it gives a lot of food for thought. Again, the second question is a little bit in line. It's also about one of these complex issues, and it's about secondary occupation. How about situations of secondary occupation, so where people left and others took their place, which leads to new conflict? How do your organizations address this? I don't know, this might also be interesting for the Iraq case to reflect on.
Yes, Gemma, thank you. Thank you so much for this question. Actually, very similar to what Ephraim was telling, we dedicated into the establishment of validate is
We are losing you. I can't
in
really
case
hear you.
they have priced the second occupancy. And can you hear me now? Sorry about this. I think because in Spain we are facing a storm right now, and it might be this. Can you hear me? Yeah, La Dana.
Now we have a window. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, what it was, we, the community, involving established the committees and we were by the first of all the beneficiaries, the neighbors, local to be formal, let's say. And yeah, this is the way that we are focusing or
yeah, Javier, it's very frustrating.
This kind
of
conflict.
It's very on and off. So I suggest when the report comes out that we include a more elaborate answer on this important question, because it was a little bit hard to follow, and that's really a pity. I'm sorry about that. Another question is about collective ownership. We've heard Federica talk about this issue that often IDP land, housing and property rights are treated in terms of individual rights. Are there no examples for any of you that work with collective ownership, which might be closer to what people are used to and also how they would feel more secure? Is there any of you who would take this question? Panelists. Jim, you might also respond if you feel it suits you.
Okay, maybe I can go ahead. Although the Somali case is, as was explained before, is a bit challenging in terms of collective ownership in urban areas because of the historical different and overlapping systems. Like imagine before there was this customary use and control over land, then there was colonization, and the Italians came in with hard formal law regulating every and each aspect, and then there was socialism under Said Barre with land in the hand of the state, and then there was civil war, land grabbing, and now people really feel secure in cities to have their own individual title deed and their own individual piece of land. However, we are very much interested in exploring what are the synergies in between traditional customary systems and urban and peri-urban, especially peri-urban settings, especially to go back also to the questions in relation to agricultural land. This could, we see it as valuable in terms of creating livelihoods as well for displacement affected communities that go back to what their skill set is, especially for like maybe a bit of elders, as some people also miss it in rural settings. But resistance to that does not come only from the government, sometimes come also from the communities. So more awareness is needed, and more a system of guarantees and checks and balances, I think, should be put in place before starting with land sharing intervention, especially for farming land. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. It's very dynamic, question-wise. Let me take, there's two questions that want to pick up on the gender issue. Let me take them together and then look at my panel who would like to pick up on it. One is what is the best affordable and sustainable strategy to provide land to displaced women, women-headed households, and low-income women? And the second is more about gender transformative measures that one might take in the context of the work you are doing. Who of the panelists can I give the floor on this gender question?
I'm happy to sort of speak in general terms.
Please do.
I think, I mean, as the question highlights and reflects, I think, women face like additional challenges often in accessing housing, land and property. And I've seen lots of examples in different places where there's been really kind of sort of deep work within the communities, but also advocating for an understanding around the rights that are equally held by women in terms of accessing housing, land and property as men and others, right? So some of it I think is about advocacy and understanding, and I've seen very positive results from like that, creating that sort of understanding around that. But often it links into the answers to some of these other questions, like around communal ownership and different ways of engaging with how communities understand rights and access to housing, land and property. So it's about working with those and trying to see what needs to change, what might support those people, because there's also a risk that in just sort of delivering and telling people about the rights, but without actually supporting the processes and how to work within communities, you can actually potentially expose people to risk as well. So it needs a kind of really coherent sort of wide-reaching approach. I'll put a link in the chat, I guess. We've got some resources on our webpage around training and accessing housing, land and property for women. So I'll share that. And I think I just wanted to say that as well with the collective ownership question as well. Again, I think one of the things when we're thinking about housing, land and property is really important to not necessarily focus on ownership per se. It's about different ways that people use access and have rights to be on the land or make use of it. And that can be lots of different groups in the same space. So people might have used to cut across land to use it for their livelihoods or to live there as well, and that can go back generations and not have been formalized. So again, as others have said, it's about supporting and finding out what community-based structures are there and trying to work with those, but also having an open mind in terms of the different forms of support and strengthening of tenure that can happen. So like, how do we help people be more certain and understand more clearly what their connection can be to the land they want to stay on or use? I'll share some resources in the chat, and then people can have a look.
Yeah, thanks for that. As you were explaining this and pondering on this question myself, I think what makes this extra complex is that also people's constructions or understandings of communities, but also of households, change because of conflict dynamics and because of the mobility they experience, and that there's also often different effects on men and women. For example, an increase of female-headed households in contexts where men are more victim to being murdered in the context of a conflict. So there's lots of additional challenges coming in. We have some questions on Latin America, but before I go there, there's a question on ethnic lines in areas of displacement. So I take that to mean we are talking about integration and relations with host community, but what happens when these are ethnically different and understood as ethnically different? And maybe this is a particular one of interest for the Somali case, where there was another question that I found, but now don't see. Yeah, is this a question relevant to the Somali case in particular, the identity question, Federica?
Yes.
How do you manage these ethnic differences? Or
it's a very, very good question. Okay, let me start by saying that usually IDPs settle on their own. It's not like they come because of community networks with either somebody who's already residing in there, or maybe the camp manager or another stakeholder involved in the camp itself. And the peculiarity of IDP settlements is that there is not one single we don't call it ethnicity, we call it clan in the Somali context. There is not one single clan, differently perhaps from like a city structure of, I don't know, Bosaso, in which it's prevalent, like one clan is prevalent. In the IDP sites of Bosaso, there are several minority clans. So you may think they are just a minority, one structure, one societal structure. No, it's not. Like they also have a constellation, very, very variegate social structures inside these camps to rule and govern the daily management of the camp itself. Now, clan is a bit sensitive topic in Somalia, but I lost track of the original question that was shaped on ethnicity and displacement. So this is the dynamic on the movement. The dynamic in the city itself, which is a bit challenging, is then to integrate and perhaps if somebody comes from like some minorities, address the marginalization or the specific vulnerabilities that come attached with this societal structure. Thanks.
Thanks. We have a few minutes for a few more questions. Efraim, there is several directed to you about the Latin American context. One is about the reliability of the Colombian data on displacement, because they come down to, I don't know if you said that 1 out of 7 Colombians would be an IDP. So there's a question on the data. And there's a question on the challenges in Latin America, especially Mexico, when it comes to the discrepancy between laws and implementation and how that might be addressed. And finally, perhaps that's a more factual question. What benefits are refugees entitled to? So if you could take them briefly together, then we might have the opportunity for one more question of my list here. Efraim?
Gracias. Bueno, son varias preguntas. Voy a tratar de responderlas lo más breve posible. Con respecto a los datos sobre desplazamiento forzado en Colombia, a ver, Colombia tiene un tema de datos bastante complejo y tenemos un registro de población desplazada, tenemos un registro de tierras abandonadas que trabajan de alguna manera de forma independiente y también tenemos pues los registros catastrales normales, comunes y corrientes que hay en el país. Sin lugar a dudas ha habido muchos retos con respecto al manejo de las cifras, sin embargo ya van muchos años en donde Colombia se ha esforzado por mejorar la calidad de la información que tiene, por ponerle en orden, todavía hay muchísimas cosas por hacer. Sin embargo, en términos generales, yo te puedo responder que sí, que son datos confiables. Evidentemente puede haber alguna discrepancia, algún tipo de subregistro o de un registro que no coincida, pero en términos generales sí nos da la idea de que efectivamente las cifras que se manejan pues dan una idea de que ese es el fenómeno y esa es digamos, el impacto que ha tenido el desplazamiento en el país. Con respecto a si es 1 en cada 7, no sé, somos 50 millones de colombianos y en el registro de población desplazada tenemos reconocidos como 8 millones de personas desplazadas. No sé eso en términos de 1 a 7 cuánto será, pero sí es una cantidad considerable de personas que han sido afectadas por el desplazamiento en Colombia. Ahora, la siguiente pregunta que tiene que ver con las discrepancias entre la ley y la aplicación de la ley, especialmente en México. Creo que son retos a los que nos enfrentamos casi que en toda Latinoamérica. Como yo les mencionaba en la ponencia, nosotros como latinoamericanos pues somos muy amantes de las leyes, nos gusta tener como un marco regulatorio siempre bien establecido, pero también tenemos como leyes para muchas cosas. Y cuando uno se acerca a los marcos regulatorios, uno dice, bueno, esto está bastante bien, es bastante bueno, pero cuando uno ve los impactos y la implementación de las leyes en territorio o en la vida real de las personas, pues ahí hay una discrepancia y hay una brecha que es grande y que es importante. Entonces no se trata únicamente de México, se trata de toda Latinoamérica, pero en el sentido de el desplazamiento forzado y los efectos del desplazamiento forzado en México, hay unos retos enormes y el primero tiene que ver con primero, la falta de regulaciones en términos de reconocer el desplazamiento interno en México. México es un estado federal, entonces cada estado tiene como sus propias iniciativas. También hay unas legislaciones nacionales, pero inicialmente hubo como una intención por parte de Chihuahua, que es uno de los estados, de reconocer el desplazamiento interno, pero eso nunca se llevó a cabo y no hay una legislación nacional que reconozca el desplazamiento forzado. Hay temas de legislación agraria que reconocen, digamos, estos fenómenos de robo de tierras y demás, pero están más asociados como a las prácticas normales que suceden en el campo y no necesariamente asociados a los escenarios de violencia que vive actualmente México. Y por otro lado, pues además de esta falta de legislación, pues también hay un tema que es de índole político, ¿no? Y tiene que ver con la voluntad de los gobiernos de México, uno tras otro, de no querer reconocer que en México hay desplazamiento interno y que los escenarios de violencia están generando que las personas se desplacen una, dos, tres veces o incluso que estén tratando de llegar, en este caso, pues a los Estados Unidos o que se estén yendo hacia otro lado. Entonces, son dos cosas, la falta de legislación y la falta de voluntad política para hacerlo. Eso es el primer paso. Y lo segundo, pues tiene que ver con un tema de capacitación o de que las autoridades reconozcan que hay un fenómeno y que implementen o que generen programas que puedan ayudar a disminuir, digamos, como la gravedad de la situación humanitaria de las personas que han sido desplazadas. En grandes rasgos sería eso. Muchas gracias. La pregunta es muy amplia.
Thank you. I'm looking at the clock. There's a few questions that remain on the list. I apologize to the people asking about the loss of documents and records of land, the people asking about ancestral lands, and the people asking about the relation, the responsibilities of communities versus states. I will ask our panelists to respond to these questions in writing as the report goes out, or perhaps in the chat if that's possible for them. But in view of the time, I will close the Q&A here, again with apologies to those whose question was not addressed right now. And I would like to move to the last bit of today's program, and that is to give all our speakers the chance in a 1 minute final statement to share what you think is a main takeaway, or a takeaway that you hope people will take with them, or a recommendation with a view to the future of these topics that are so important. Perhaps even, please, even less than 1 minute, less than 1 minute. Very good. So just a few words from each of you. I'll start with Jim.
Okay, yeah, mine hopefully is quite short. It's about taking really seriously the question of the context and knowing the context, and knowing that every place we ever go to, live and are is different, has different ways of arranging how people engage with housing, land, property. So we need to always be asking that question: how are things done? Trying to understand, what have we missed? What do we need to know? Who misses out? Where's the power? All of these kind of questions. So that would be my takeaway, having listened to the different examples and the questions as well.
Yeah, I will end with Javier because we don't know how it will go. Efraín?
Ok, gracias. Bueno, no, sencillamente mencionar que a nivel de Latinoamérica tenemos unas necesidades en las que todas las personas que estamos aquí presentes, independientemente del sector que estemos representando, pues tenemos una tarea grande, y es visibilizar el tema de vivienda, tierra y propiedad a nivel regional como una necesidad importante, no solamente para abordar los retos humanitarios, sino también para abordar otros temas en términos de paz, desarrollo y construcción de paz y lo humanitario. Y lo segundo es justamente eso, ¿no? Es cómo podemos fortalecer ese triple nexo de trabajo entre humanitario, paz y desarrollo, para poder dar una respuesta mucho más adecuada a las necesidades del contexto que vivimos en Latinoamérica. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you. Federica?
Thank you so much. I enjoyed a lot this conversation and the questions. So just we said that indeed, like tenure and HLP rights are not black and white. It's a continuum, and it needs a constant effort in protecting the rights of the people that use the land and that live on land. And this is especially important in a context of displacement fueled by environmental changes, where population movements are forecasted to increase in the future years. So the response should adapt and should remain constantly in dialogue with the community that we try to help. Thanks.
Thank you. Javier, let's have a last try with you. Your 30 seconds.
Let's try my 30 seconds. Main takeaway would be building the trust is a little bit in line what Jim was saying. One solution here does not apply to maybe another place, but building the trust has been proven to be a cornerstone for the community and also for the government in order to recognize HLP rights and IDP rights.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Thanks to the audience for your excellent questions. Thanks to the panelists for sharing your experience. Thanks to the organizers, Neil in the background, for all the work you did to prepare the speakers and the chair. Yes, I hope everybody found lots of insight and inspiration back to their own places and own work. Thank you for joining us, and hope to see you in the rest of the series. Thank you, and have a good day, evening, wherever you are.